Hi, Ben. So you have a lot of really good material here. Um, it's pretty far reaching, actually. And I know that you began with motivation, and you certainly have explored factors of motivation in the paper, right? Economic. You talk about um, the decline of mental health among college students, with the pandemic in the backdrop. And you kind of talk about the uncertainty of the future a little bit with college students, which might further contribute to the lack of motivation. But I wonder, to me, the part of this paper that really shines is where you're mentioning how the pandemic has particularly affected not just the motivation, but just the welfare of low income students. Um, there's something really interesting about that, that the current economic model of the university has been more and more um, uh, kind of casting itself into the top 1%. And there's something interesting about that. I wonder if your paper really could be focused on this idea that, wow, all of us are struggling, right? Um, but even more so, we're not thinking about the lack of motivation that is inspired in low income students, right? Who don't have the resources, to kind of mitigate some of the challenges, especially economic, that face everyone during the pandemic, right? Um, and then obviously that could contribute to the anxiety of the student, which further perpetuates a lack of motivation, right? And then even looking at the climate of colleges. And you talk a lot about how they've started residing on contingent faculty a lot more, with no job security, um, and how that could potentially impact the student. And what I really think about is that a lot of low income students are first gen, right? And first gen students don't have a lot of the academic modeling that privileged students do. And so faculty who are teaching them really need to give those students kind of more modeling attention. Um, and if they are economically taxed, the faculty, because of their lack of job security and not getting fair wages, it's hard for them to dedicate their time to those students, to model them, to actually shape them for the academic environment. And so I'm seeing how all of your categories actually could ultimately contribute to an investigation, particularly of the impacts that the current system of education, exacerbated by the pandemic, have contributed to even more lack of motivation by the very students that probably need it most, right? Um, these low income kids who could potentially diversify the professional workplace if indeed they succeed, but maybe they're having a hard time doing so. I give this as a suggestion because right now, while you have a lot of amazing stuff, um, the paper needs a little bit more focus. It's kind of all over the place, and that's really seen in the intro. So maybe ponder this idea. Obviously, you don't need to do this idea. You could just stick with the lack of motivation. And if that indeed is it, and you're going to be doing a categorical investigation of a lack of motivation in all college students, with maybe just, a little side item saying, and, low income students are hit the hardest by this, then we need to frame your paper a little bit more strong in the beginning. Right now, the intro doesn't really lead us to exactly what the paper is going to strive for. And so um, those are the two options I wanted to give you. Think about them, and let's come to your conference next week with perhaps a strategy. Good luck.